Cardiff v Spurs FA Cup third round, January 1977. Another of those didn't they stories. Legend has it that Spurs Yid Army took the Cardiff end during this encounter. But as the saying goes, the truth is out there. We get the story from two rival perspectives of people who were present as the action unfolded. Cardiff fan Craig told us, "I can remember the offs in the 70s with the Midlands clubs on the old Grange end, because I always liked to be in the ground early, and Birmingham, Leicester and Villa would have the Grange to themselves until 10-3, when the special would arrive in. The sight of 1,000 City fans making their way across the Bob Bank heading for the Grange was like something out of Zulu. By kick-off, the Grange was back with the City with the chant, 1 the 4-5, if you want to stay alive, keep off the Grang end, and not a visiting fan in sight. Only one club ever took the Grange end, and that was Portsmouth in 1973. Spurs charged at the end of the cup game in 77, but other than that, no one else came close. Although if the fences weren't erected for the Man U game, there would have been a bloodbath. The Spurs Cup game was interesting. They were in the enclosure. They got done outside the Craddock before the game. I was 18 and remember coming out of the Grange end to a sea of Yids, Spurs everywhere. At first they backed Cardiff off into the Grange end. City fans stood on top of turnstiles throwing missiles at them. Eventually City got out, but Spurs stood their ground. But then Cardiff charged and steamed straight into Spurs. It was mental outside, with Cardiff eventually getting the better of the Spurs mob. Trouble all the way back to the station, up and down Tudor Road. Police really struggled to contain Cardiff, who were evil that day. Probably due to the shock of someone trying to take their end. The audacity of it all. Fair play to Spurs though. A very underrated firm in my opinion, and definitely in my top 10 of all-time firms. The following September, their firm never showed up for a League Division 2 match, which was disappointing after their massive show for the Cup game. But then again, the FA Cup was massive in those days and attracted huge crowds and big firms. Spurs fan Rory told us, "To be honest, I'm not sure which end was the Cardiff end. We were in the Bob Bank or whatever it was called. Nothing much happened before the game. The usual hooligan stuff of running and getting run back and forwards. But just before the end of the match, we went round to their end. The Grange, I think it was called, and tried to get in. The gates were locked and so we couldn't get in. I think they would have panicked and fled onto the pitch if those gates had been open. We'd seen this tactic work quite well at other grounds and by other London firms due to the surprise of it all. Anyway, with the gates locked, we were stuck in the street goading Cardiff to come out. The old Bill had them locked in, but eventually sheer weight of numbers forced their gate open and they steamed out into the street. It was toe-to-toe stuff, a proper good fight. We held our ground for ages, but sheer weight of numbers of Cardiff forced us back up the street. It carried on right the way back to the station, with police woefully trying to keep the two firms apart. I would say we just about edged it in terms of taking the fight to them and aggression, but they had the upper hand in the street due to their superior numbers. It was part of the process, trying to take ends and all that. Great fun as long as no one got hurt. But sometimes people get hurt. I would go back to those days in an instant. We thank Craig and Rory for their recollections. It's clear the Grange wasn't taken at any point, as both rival firm members clarify it. Must be another of those mythical stories that just keep coming. We will always strive to get you the real stories from real people, so don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of future videos. It really helps our channel grow to give you bigger, better content.